Hello, welcome. I think I actually muted the intro video, but we're grateful for you showing up and giving us some of your attention.
Yes, welcome. A very warm welcome to everyone. This is the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shanebrook.
And I'm Sean Kelly.
And today we are talking about part 2 of our 2-part series on Divine Union 5D communication.
Yeah.
And if you haven't yet seen part 1, I believe there's a link to it in our episode description.
Yep.
And if it's okay, I'll just start with a very brief summary of what we talked about in part 1. And then Sean in particular has a lot to share in this episode. So correct me if I'm wrong, Sean Kelly, but I believe one of the main principles that we are serving here in the Divine Union, in the partnership, is a continual coming back to love and faith in ourselves, in our partner, and in the relationship and in all aspects of our life. And this is it really seems like the main initiation journey that we're going through as we move from 3rd density to 4th density, choosing love and faith over fear.
Yeah. I guess, so in the past, this is, I think, really important. In the past, we've had our avatars arrive, the Christ and Buddha, etc. And their purpose was to show the avatar potential in a human, to show that divinity can be here as human and express as human. Those you can watch them and read their teachings and distinctly feel this is not a human speaking, right? As we progress, that realization of self as divinity expressing itself, the I am presence here now, is the next step for those who wish to go that way. Not everyone's ready for that, and primarily if you're here listening to this, you're probably approaching that consideration of doing that. And so relationships become a tool for both, fun and comfort and things, but also for sort of story, basically. And we use these things to then correct our misperceptions. So the primary goal then is to, in order to be at an avatar type consciousness state, one has to learn how to construct a garment of basically acceptance, forgiveness, and positivity in order to really hold that. And so we offer each other contrast, and we offer each other different sort of experiences of conflict or separation or whatever it is, in order to notice the misperceptions that are causing our discomfort, and then to learn how to accept and surrender those, give those to the Christ or the God self, or give those away to divinity. And there was a really good poem, I think I sent it to you last night, and it just says, I hold fear in one hand, I hold love in the other, I choose love and choose love again. So when we're talking about fear or letting go of fear, a lot of people misunderstand it as throwing it aside, casting it away from us. That's how I let go of it. But what we're truly doing is accepting that it's there and letting go of its merit, right? We're letting go of the belief in it, not that it's not there. It is there. We can see it. It's there. But it's a lie. And so when a lie is present, you just have to see it for the lie it is. And once you do that, it starts to fall away. And so I would say that the primary thing here is to learn. What we're trying to do is to learn how to be the Christ while going about our business and while doing the things we feel called to do, having experiences that we feel called to enjoy. And we're sort of constructing the personality to be in harmony with the Christ in all moments. And a result of that is this communication type challenge that we have. And that's what it kind of informs, this type of sensitivity and this challenge for the one realizing themselves as the Christ to accept that others don't yet see us that way, perhaps. There's a period of time that it takes for an individual who's observing you to go, oh, this person is not who they were. Everything about who they were is kind of gone. Any of the negative thoughts that I had about them are kind of fading into the background. And I should probably stop presuming about them. But because we've had the relationships for so long, or we established them earlier on, prior to this presence that comes to sit with us as us, we have stories still. So we form new stories as we begin the journey of the relationship, and then we have to let go of those too. So so I think that's sort of the primary purpose of this, and there are many pathways to that. Some choose to just sit in a hole somewhere. Yeah. And others choose to do something like this. You have talked about what did you say about being in the house, a homemaker? Or
a householder.
A householder. Yes.
Term in Kundalini yoga about the one who takes the path of being in the material world and perhaps having a partner, perhaps having children, running a household, and that path as their spiritual path versus being more isolated as a monk or a hermit. So I just want to piggyback off what you have said, is that the path here is each partner really, releasing everything that they're not and really remembering their God self. Their God self coming through them and then coming together in partnership, and the relationship is the vehicle to do this. Yeah. Not that there aren't other things we're doing outside of the relationship to continue to awaken, but I'll say, at least for myself, that our relationship has been an incredibly profound vehicle for remembering my God self. And I just want to, oh, you're welcome. Thank you, sir. And then I just wanted to also bring up one more chunk that we talked about in part one, just as a quick summary, is that, so in addition to everything else we just shared, that's something that really came through you, Sean, in particular last time, was about this doing things really from an orientation of partnership in every aspect. And you brought up when one partner has fear, for instance, that does arise. And I love what you said, that we see the fear, we acknowledge the fear, but we don't give it merit. We don't energize it. We do not see it as real, but we are aware of it. But when one of us has fear, that we can look at it as our fear. Our relationship has fear right now. And then as much as possible to partner and move through it together. So, and this has been, it sounds almost ridiculous, but a huge remembering or relearning for me, because I spent half a century on my own as an individual, pretty much. I was in different relationships, but it always felt I was still on my own. and they were probably more transactional relationships. So all of this is new to me, and I'm still really learning about being an us and having our everything as our. And then you've also shared that as we move into fourth density, we're coming back more into a social memory complex where it's a oneness and all together unity. So coming together as partners here on this plane it seems like a precursor in a way to coming back to our larger group, and coming back, of course, to our God self.
Yeah. First, we have to see all as our brothers and sisters. Even, Putin, for example. We have to be able to see people that way in order for us to I guess, resolve the paradox of unity. If we reject any being as not being one of our brothers or sisters, including animal life and plant life, then we're basically rejecting divinity itself here. And so what we end up doing with our relationship too is we have a lot of teachings right now that are a little bit confused around sovereignty. And one of the things that the twin type relationship or divine partnership type relationship will highlight is this confusion of sovereignty. Essentially, the ego self claims itself as God and sovereign because it feels that there is that I am this identity here, and I decide what is best for me. I know what is best for me, and I will enact my will, which is essentially denying that the creator is what plucks your strings. The creator plays you, sort of. And so it's really important, and one of the things that we'll really look at and push against with each other as our egos want to maintain this sovereign feel, this sense of I hold my power. And it's a little bit of a confusion. The human self, or the identity, false self, doesn't truly know what's best for it, and you can kind of just know that through your experiences of you make decisions and they suck, right? And it's not really what you wanted. You learn, right? But the reason that happened is because the creator saw an opportunity for learning and said, let's learn this. And so now the human goes rationalization, rash decisions, thoughts, I'll go do. And in truth, the human didn't do anything, and there was no causality there. And as that fades away, there becomes no need to defend our sovereignty, because it's innate to us. It has nothing to do with our identity. So when we're defending our sovereignty in any way, it's because we feel threatened, basically, in some way, which is just more fear, and it's one of the main things we'll do is like we'll say, my preference is for you to sort of do this with me, or what is your preference about how I show up? And we're trying to be considerate, but really what we're kind of doing there is we're playing with this idea that I know what's best to be brought to me, and the creator doesn't, in a way, right? We're putting our faith in our egoic self, which claims to be sovereign and in control, and actually claims that it is God. And so we can never think our way to God. We have to experience divinity. And that's one of the ways we do that, is by noticing that we're making these kind of errors in perception. And there's a period of time where we will kind of bash up against each other. And really, this is primarily just the egoic side of ourselves bashing into each other, pushing, not really accepting what is, kind of wanting things not to be as they are, right? In some way. And whenever we want something to be not as it is now, we are in some way a sense of confusion, and that can really be confused with passivity. It's really easy to confuse that concept with or acceptance and surrender with passivity. And there is certainly a state where passivity becomes the experience of sort of the void, because nothingness is here and this is a void. And so we reach that state and action seems silly for us for a while. Tassel may remember I went through this where I talked about it openly. I said, I don't see the purpose in a lot of doing or saying things. Like, a lot of me just wanted to kind of be quiet in a cave. And so there's not passivity. It's instead, it's an upliftment that occurs to the moment. So when you accept what is as it is, it becomes transformed into a blessing. And then what is and what was perceived as an issue or challenge or problem just becomes a gift. And in order for us to do that, though, we have to have reflections, right? Or usually we have to have reflections of these moments of conflict and things for us to see it, for us to see that our ego really wants to bend others, to conform a bit to what we want. And it's hard to notice we're doing that, especially when we're on this path. We don't want our truer self, which we feel doesn't want to bend others, yet we often are trying to do that, or our motivation is that in many ways, because it would contribute to our comfort, or it's contributing to our discomfort, and we want to correct it, put it into order so we can feel kind of better and more on solid ground. And it's because we're sort of uncertain where this will go. It doesn't resonate really with what I feel I should be experiencing, or what it's more accurate to say what I think I should be experiencing. And our thoughts about what is always, there's always an agenda there by the ego, pretty much. And so what we end up needing to do is discard all of these agendas. And it's through our partnerships and our relationships that we can quite easily do that, providing we're approaching it from that acceptance, surrender, and peace, knowing imperfection. These concepts intellectually can help us to reduce our energizing of the negative concepts of resistance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would it be okay to maybe give a real life example, maybe between us, of everything that you've beautifully described?
Sure.
So I think I've said this before in the stream, but so we met about 2 years ago, actually this week, 2 years ago. And I would say in the beginning of our relationship, I, for one, was still very much in this 3D, maybe more transactional way of relating. And I would just bring up things that were difficult for me, hoping that they could shift. And over time, and you really greatly helped me with this, I learned a new way of looking at all of that, which I think is what you were just describing. So first of all, I would say the practice is, if something is very difficult for you with the way you're interacting with your partner, I think the first step is just go within, feel all your feelings about it. Often your higher self may take you into other situations that are mirrors of this particular situation. This has happened constantly in our relationship. I'll just give an example. If I may feel abandoned in the moment in our relationship, I have had a lot of abandonment experiences in this lifetime and in other lifetimes. And so, so if I feel abandoned, I can feel into that. And often I will see little snapshots of previous situations where I felt abandoned, but probably didn't fully feel the feelings back then. And so this catalyst as an opportunity for me to really move those feelings through me, integrate anything I need to. And usually there's some wisdom, a gift on the other end of it. So we're constantly kind of volleying catalyst to each other to help us purify. Okay, that's like the first step. Then I would say once you've run it through yourself, if there still feels like maybe there is something that might be helpful to talk about in terms of our harmony together, you came up with this great way to phrase it. Okay, there's this topic, and I'm wondering if we could each share our preferences around this topic. So in the past, I might have led with, this is very difficult for me, and I'm wondering if we could do it this way. And again, like my egoic self in control, thinking it knows what's best for my comfort. So instead, you and I have talked a lot about preferences, so that there's this container in our relationship of unconditional acceptance and love and surrender to what is. And then at the same time, we can also share our preferences around different topics. And then what seems to happen is it feels really magical. The highest and best direction seems to sort of magically bubble up in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we've been doing. And I'll say, like, sometimes I don't do that. So that's what I've been, we just sort of came up with the end of that practice after something we moved through over this past week where there was some conflict. So anyway, that's like sort of the second step is like our new way of doing things.
Yeah. And can I add on to that a little?
Yes, please.
The obvious thing here is communication, right? We have to talk about these things. You know, if I'm saying things that are judgmental and not accepting, or expressing resistance to how Tassel is, and it feels bad for her, and she doesn't tell me, then I may not notice I'm doing it. Part of our duty, I think, is to reflect the truth. And so when I'm expressing something and Tassel feels maybe hurt, sometimes, actually most of the time, and it's not just Tassel, if I feel hurt either way, almost every time, I don't want to make absolute statements, but I would say every time it's because we've put merit in a lie. We believe a lie. So even if the other isn't expressing a judgment or a resistance to who you are, that's okay. It doesn't have to be believed. So that's part of the correction that we do with each other is, she may say something, and then I may say something back, and then she may say that feels unkind, and then I may say something like, your feelings are yours, or something, and that doesn't seem very supportive. It doesn't seem supportive in the sense of partnership the way we're talking about partnership. However, there is something to be said about the benefit of just shining right at the truth of it, which is that if someone feels something about how you are that is negative, it's their business primarily. We can talk about it, but we have to talk about it as partners in equality. And so we have to have let go a bit of the part of us that really doesn't like it. Basically, we have to say, if this continues, I am totally okay with it. And Tassel says this sometimes. If this continues, I'm totally okay with it. I've accepted that this is what I'm witnessing. And so part of what we then are trying to do is I then reflect on what she reflected to me, which is you're being unkind, or this feels unkind. And then I think, well, am I? Am I being unkind? And to a degree, I noticed, yeah, I guess I could have been kinder. I could be kinder in some of these expressions, right? I could be a little gentler, right? And so it's the communication about it all that is what facilitates the real growth. But the communication can't properly take place until both are, basically, if I feel judged, I have to let go of that. And if Tassel feels resistance to what I'm doing, she has to let go of that. So we can look at it as almost like two scientists trying to solve a problem.
That's
or an
what I was
equation.
thinking. Yeah. We try to take the charge out of it, I would say.
Yeah. So it's still there. It's still a thing. We're still
Yeah.
aware that there's a part of us that doesn't really dig it so much.
Yeah.
But we don't really have to give that so much power. And when we step away from it and realize that story is not who we are,
Mm-hmm.
we're just looking at a situation between two entities. That's all we're doing. We don't have to be so involved,
Yes.
but we can't step out of it.
Yeah.
While we're in it and feeling it. It's very appropriate to feel it, right? So
Yeah, it's almost like we talk about this a lot, kind of experiencing it on two different levels, like the human Tassel and the human Sean may be feeling hurt, judgment might come up, resistance might come up, all these human experiences. But at the same time, I think what you're in part saying is in this larger part of ourselves, in our God self, we can know, first of all, this is all perfect, that this is happening. This is an opportunity probably to see some things, and maybe in a way, can we say, just not take it quite so seriously in a way?
developing, I call this a sense of proportion, which could also be called a sense of humor, right?
Oh my gosh, if we could bring in just a sense of humor to every possible conflict, that would be perfect.
Yeah, that is a really high consciousness way, I find, to look at these types of weird things that people do. And it's a lot easier to do it with strangers. When you see a stranger, I don't know them, I don't know anything about this person or this identity I'm observing, this form of the creator expressing itself. I don't know what they're doing, and I'm watching them just freak out. And it can sound like it's not compassionate to find it a little bit humorous. But let's say that we're standing in the supermarket, and the person in front of us is just kind of yelling at the cashier, let's say, because some part of this service did not go the way they wanted. Maybe they had to wait too long, and they're just freaking out. And you standing back are going, this is such a small transient moment, and this being is just freaking out, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny that they're doing that. It's kind of humorous that the sense of proportion to what is occurring now is so grand, because the ego cannot understand why it had to wait for what it wants. It doesn't comprehend waiting, really. So
Yeah.
the person's freaking out about it, and you can just observe that, and you can do it with your partner as well and yourself by stepping out of it all and just being like, look how that was a bit crazy. That was a bit wacky. And
Yeah. I'm almost, oh,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah.
um,
I was thinking as you were saying that, to see, to hold the understanding of the divinity of oneself and the other and of the moment. It's all divine, it's all perfect, all is well, nothing is wrong. It's
right.
all an opportunity, it's all the creator experiencing itself, expanding, etc.
And I
And
just want to. Oh, sorry. I thought you were
oh,
done there.
I was just going to say that I'm just thinking again, maybe for me at least, a helpful way to do this is to what I just said, the divinity is present. And okay, and at the same time, the human tassel is experiencing this.
Right.
Um, because we can't ignore the human. We can't ignore the human. Um, I think we can have perspective on the human. Uh, but we are also here to, it's almost like the human is leading the opportunity. It's through the human that we're experiencing. If all the time we just felt our complete contentedness and bliss as the creator, nothing would be happening. There'd be no expansion. So the human is the one who's leading the expansion. It's through the human that we're experiencing the contrast and the opportunity to grow. So, but having, as you said, a sense of proportion, a sense of perspective, seems really, really helpful.
There's a reason that when one becomes enlightened, they laugh hysterically. Um, there's a reason when they fall into that satori state, and then kind of realize what sort of what's been going on, or what's not been going on. They just laugh because it's just hilarious, really. There's no other real way. It's a supreme sense of proportion, uh, and the transient nature of what you are here as a human, and it can't be anything other than just very comical at that experience. And so sometimes we'll have that experience and then forget that a little. We're tempted back a lot from the egoic mind, tempted back into attachment with the things we have already seen are transient. Um, because we think that these things are what define us. And you know, one of the really helpful practices to find peace is to notice that, you know, for example, we have to surrender essentially everything to the creator. We 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 have to. And the ego does not like to hear that. Everything, like my kids? What does that mean, right? And so it sort of means that when we surrender the relationship or the attachments to the creator, we don't lose the relationships. They don't go away. What happens is they're uplifted into a divine state. They don't fall away. Love grows. It doesn't diminish itself. So the ego tells us, no, if you surrender everything, if you surrender all of your identity, then you won't be a father, you won't be a mother, you won't be whatever it is that you're attached to being. Which isn't true. You'll be all of those things and more, because you'll be all that is. And so we have a lot of resistance to doing that. And so through our partnership, we end up exploring a lot of these deeper areas. And Tassel said stuff like carrot on a stick, your partner being the carrot. You know, often with humans, we don't really do a lot without a reward. And so, in order to start to pull us along, that's one of the reasons for these divine partnerships that have come here this way, is to help pull each other along this path, because there doesn't seem to be any other option but to surrender and accept and to let go of egoic attachment. And it gets a little, it can be a little bit confrontational, because both egoic selves or both false identities will battle it out a little. Or one might claim, I think when Tassel and I first came together, both of us were, I don't want to speak for her, I'll just speak for me. I still had an attachment as sovereign, but the egoic sovereignty, which is not real, the sense that Sean controls everything. Sean is the, and that's an error of perception. And so what ends up happening is she asks me to bend to something, and I just flat out say no, and I don't really engage in a conversation. Or I think one of the first times this happened, one of the very first times I recall it, was, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but I think I slept in or something, and she kind of said, I don't feel like this is honoring me. Like you sleeping in. And
Was it that like you were late or something?
We had a plan to talk at a certain time. And
Okay.
I think literally, I just forgot to
Okay.
set an alarm and stuff. And now, so these are all divine orchestrations, right? To make sure she gets uncomfortable and feels not honored, feels whatever. And then I go, excuse me, I just fell asleep. I was asleep. I wasn't intending to dishonor. How can I dishonor or honor you when I'm not even here to do that? Right? So both of us were, and I was perturbed by it, right? And at that time, I don't think I had the sort of wherewithal and confidence in myself as well, to speak out as much about that type of thing, because I was afraid that if I said sorry, but like that's not what's happening, I was afraid that she would go, oh, that means that he's going to continue to dishonor. That means I'm going to leave. Right? And so part of what we do as we expand is we start to realize that not all twin or divine partnership type connections will persist forever or for the entire lifetime. Some of them come and they do the learning and then eventually go their separate ways. And there's always that choice that's there, and that's where that separation comes in. And the truer divine partnership is sort of more like, regardless of the romantic, regardless of the business relationship, regardless even of the friendship itself, we are here together. The it's more like a friendship that lasts beyond the concepts of romantic partnership, business partnership, or familial partnership. It's a divine partnership that can run its course, and that too is perfect. And then it can, bubble up again, in fact. And so part of what we need to try and do is to just recognize and trust, and this again, it's all surrender, really, just that if our partner and us are not able to come to harmony and somebody runs away and leaves, that's okay. It's hard, but it's okay. And then you just sort of you have to trust and know that if the creator wills it, not if the identity self that's attached yearns for it, but if the creator wills it, which is, you know, your plan that you're not really privy to, then it will, like, that's how you could think. It's already sort of planned out a lot. Not 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 planned in a way that it's cemented, but the opportunities that are going to come in each life are more or less set up a bit, and they can shift and change. It's not, like I said, not cemented. Um, and so if we want to remain in harmony, we have to kind of let go of our attachment to the partner in many ways. We have to basically accept them unconditionally, which means accepting their unacceptance or non-acceptance as well. And that means that all we want for them is their highest good. And Eckhart Tolle, or maybe it was Ram Dass, one of them said, romantic love is wanting someone. True love is wanting someone's good. Basically, you want their highest good for them. If they discern their highest good for them is to not be around you, then that too is okay. And so, but the communication ends up being things that push against these kind of fears of rejection or abandonment or these types of things in ourselves, that we worry that if my partner leaves, then I won't be able to live with myself. I won't. And we can run through that. I think I don't know what to call it, but I call it the and then practice. So Tassel and I do this, and where it's like, if my partner leaves, and then what? And then I'll be really, really sad. I'll be lonely and all these things. And then what? I'll get on with my days, right? And I'll try to find peace despite the situation, despite the external. And I think Ram Dass, for example, had a stroke when he was getting towards the end of his days here. And he basically was saying that that's a blessing. Also, there's a teaching. If you search, I think Ram Dass and Eckhart, they have like a meeting shortly before his passing, and they do a talk together. And Ram Dass is having a lot of trouble speaking, but he knows he's not the body, and he knows there's a divine purpose to this stroke. There's something that he, in his journey, had not yet really seen in himself. And so the stroke happens. And so we surrender all to divinity. And then when we do that, we find peace, because everything is now a little bit impersonal, but coated with love and appreciation, acceptance, and it informs just a state of peace. And that's primarily why I've had trouble in the past with the twin flame concepts, because I've just seen how hard it is for people, and I think that a lot of the teachings are somewhat distorted, just because people they anthropomorphize divinity into a human form or human conceptualizations. So even the idea of divine partnership, a human conceptualization of that is that two beings come together and are together. But the divine partnership is truly more within, and the other is helping you find it within. And then you can still stay together and both be partnered within together. And nothing has to fall away, but there has to be an acknowledgement that if the creator wills it, it may fall away. So if we want to be in peace, otherwise we'll be afraid that we're going to lose things, and that will inform activity, thought, or expression created in fear, which will have to be dismantled.
So you've made a lot of really great points, and maybe I'll just highlight some of what really struck me. Um, so this surrender to the creator in everything, um, you touched on it. It can feel really like, what? I have to like surrender to God, everything. Well, what about what I want? And just coming back to, you are the creator, and whatever is happening is your plan. So just to remember that the creator is not separate from us. We are all fractals, aspects, pieces of the creator. And whatever is happening is absolutely your soul's desire and plan for this incarnation.
Exactly. Yes. Like your wants, like the human wants, are confused a lot. Sometimes they're totally bang on, right? They're totally accurate, and that's totally appropriate for those. But sometimes they're not. And
Yeah. And maybe I can just give a real life example kind of what we're talking about. So one of the hardest things for my human tassel to accept in this incarnation has been that I don't live full time with my kids, that I went through a divorce and I share custody and their dad is great. But it was my human's dream to be a full-time mom. I wanted that so much. And this has been very hard for me to accept and to surrender to. And I'm about 5.5 years into it at this point of sharing custody. And so that's been a long time. And it's still something that that can be challenging. But what I want to say about this is, when I drop into my God self, and sometimes the easiest way for me to do that is I just kind of imagine myself dropping into my heart. And that kind of just immediately like brings me into my God self. I feel the plan. I feel that I am not supposed to be with my kids full time. For their experience that they've contracted to have through me, for my own experience, I can feel the truth of that. I feel it.
mm-hmm.
I can feel the peace of that. I can feel this is what is right. This is what is highest and best. And it's taken me a long time to feel that, partly because I would feel guilty about it. I'd feel like I'm not a good mom for even like admitting that, because shouldn't a mom always want to be with their kids and stuff? So I think the point I'm trying to make is, I think we can see the difference between the human, the egoic agenda, and your true like soul's plan for yourself. Like you can feel it. You can feel like, this is what's right. I know it is. It might be really hard, but I can feel it. And you can feel the peace of that. And I think a lot of what you were saying just now, and I think what we say in general, is really isn't the ultimate enlightenment or the ultimate goal to have peace within ourselves. Isn't that really what we probably all want the most, is just peace? And so I know for myself, again, I'll just say a couple more examples. I had all these human desires. So in addition to being a full-time mom, I wanted, once my divorce was over, I wanted my life partner, my real life partner, to come in and we could live together and just live happily ever after. That was like, and so you and I met, and you are my life partner, and you're amazing. But there's been some unexpected surprises, including that you're from Canada and I'm from Tennessee. And right now, at times, we're not together. And this, again, like the custody situation, was just, are you kidding me, God? Are you kidding me? Everything that I've been through in this lifetime, can't I just have my life partner in the same town? So I went through a lot with that. And again, when I feel into my higher self around all of that, there have been so many amazing benefits. for my growth in every aspect because of the distance. If you and I 2 years ago lived in the same town, I would not have grown at all. I would have just been like,
I doubt the relationship would have even worked. To be honest, just because, especially when we first met, I was all about my space. I needed it at that time.
yeah.
If I didn't have it, then I would have just withdrawn, most likely.
Yeah.
I needed space to just be alone by myself and formulate this lesson plan that I'm trying to deliver.
Yeah, it's almost like I feel like you and I almost were we've developed in opposite ways. I think I needed to learn to be more self-sufficient. I thought I was before we met. I'd spent many years on my own. I'm like, I got it together. I'm a divine feminine. I know what I'm doing. But then I'm Libra South Node, which means I've spent so many lifetimes in partnership and in, so it's easy for me to just fall into a relationship and kind of lose myself, basically.
Yeah.
So I think on my side, it was really important for me to spend time apart from you in order to really ground in my sovereignty, really, and my inner relationship, my partnership with myself.
Yeah.
And then maybe for you, it was a little, you were maybe more learning to be in partnership or to learn to be more intimate or share more.
I'm learning, the way I feel about it is I'm learning to be more cooperative and inclusive with others, with humans, basically, with other souls here. I find them to be confusing a lot. Most people. And so I think with you, I recognized a certain purity, a safety, I guess. And that's why primarily, I don't, I've obviously talked to other people, but I don't really so much have a lot of relationships with people. I could sense I guess I just could sense a safety there. Is I think what drew me into that is sort of feeling that I do need to figure out how to cooperate, how to model this type of acceptance of each other.
Yeah. And you mentioned even that you're familiar with sort of going off and living in a cave, and you have a sense that you spent many lifetimes doing that. So it's super interesting because it seems like you spent many lifetimes being alone. And I think I spent many lifetimes being in a relationship.
Most of my lifetimes here have been spent being alone and then coming out to speak and then being killed or something like that, or imprisoned, thrown into wherever, burned at the stake, these types of things. And so I don't trust humans at all, really.
Yes. I know you have that orientation.
And I'm at a different space now, where basically in the past, I'd have sort of, oh, I see. And then I'd come down from the mountain to try to express as divinity here, and they wouldn't accept at all and then attack. And so I would have these distortions back then arise of safety and security and feeling threatened and all these other things. And in those past lives, I wasn't able to relinquish and surrender the body. And so that's essentially where I am now. I've more or less starting to learn how to feel safe with people, just in general. So I just really need just one person to kind of really truly accept me to a really high level, and it doesn't have to be full and pure, but for it to be to a very high level of acceptance, for me to go, okay, there are some who see me now, and that's basically in this lifetime is what will help me to basically feel safe to speak, accept that many will hear what I say. Some will, I've been called a cult leader and things in this lifetime, which is really interesting, really, really interesting. When I was called the cult leader, I said, yeah, send me some money and I'll get you on the newsletter. I'll get you on the newsletter.
Would it be okay if I share a few more practices in general about 5D
Of course.
union? So you brought it up earlier. You said how important communication is. And of course, how we communicate is so important. And I just wanted to share an example of really leaning into vulnerability as we communicate. And you and I had some really vulnerable conversations around our intimate physical relationship, our sex life, over the past couple of days. And I hope you don't mind me bringing it up.
No?
I'm not gonna say any details or anything, but we each shared some things that I don't think we had ever really shared before about some of the ways we would interact. And I think we realized there were some like misunderstandings and around some of our sexual behavior, which had caused like some hurt feelings and maybe some behavior. And it was like, it was fascinating. I kept saying, I'm so glad we're talking about this. I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I always talk about like, just always trying to show up in every aspect of your life, including your relationship, just in your highest and best that you can. So showing up in love, showing up in acceptance, and showing up in vulnerability, it just always brings so many gifts when we do that. When we can feel it's a safe place to do that, of course, that's obviously really important. So I just wanted to highlight all the gifts that come from being vulnerable. And being vulnerable, what does it really mean? It means being truthful about something that maybe feels a little like hard to be truthful about. Maybe you're showing how much you really care about the other person, or you might be sharing something that maybe society deems embarrassing, or there's usually some type of story around the share that makes it feel vulnerable. But it's really just being like radically truthful.
Right.
And I think we have found in our individual lives and together, like the more truthful we are with compassion and kindness and acceptance, the deeper the partnership becomes. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. Like it's just, it goes deep when you go deep. As you go deep, as you share deeply, then the relationship becomes deeper. That's as within, so without, right? And then just a couple other little points. And we haven't talked about this, so I'm going to ask you about this if it's okay. You wrote in a text to me, an approach of forgiveness before action.
Yeah.
And do you basically mean like I forgive you before anything? Like it's a blanket of forgiveness.
Yeah. So you mentioned vulnerability, and this ties into that. So it's vulnerable to say something like, I see where I messed up. But the vulnerability comes from the ego. Like the vulnerability, the feeling of, I'm not sure if this is safe, but I'm going to trust and be vulnerable. Like it's the ego sort of relinquishing some of the fear a little bit,
Yeah.
and opening up a bit. And it's essentially, we forgive the other because we know they cannot threaten us. We are divine, and are unthreatenable in truth. And so we forgive them. You know, if you throw a Molotov cocktail at my house and set it on fire, you're forgiven. It's it's a house. So, you know, and of course, if that were to occur, there's all these consequences of that behavior. All these things happen. All these forms occur and conceptualizations of karma that would be acquired by that action. Probably you'd go to jail, things like that. But so we don't forgive as in we, like I said, forgiveness can seem like passivity. We can hold true to ourselves while forgiving what we feel is maybe not highest and best. But the idea is that we are essentially, there's nothing to forgive because we cannot be threatened, because what they're doing or not doing is their divine expression. And if their divine expression even gets to the place of harming the body, such as the Christ or Jesus with the perfect sacrifice, even that too is not a threat. So of course I'm not advocating that anyone stay in abuse or anything, but I am saying that nothing real may be threatened. And that's the vulnerability starts to help us step to that. There's stepping stones sort of up a stairway, right? And the vulnerability and openness helps us feel safe to express some of these fears, and help us see them more as well as we talk about them with each other and get a perspective. Our partner will usually have a perspective that can kind of blow our mind a bit. You know, like I didn't realize that I was ignoring my feelings before I met Tassel. I didn't realize I was doing that at all, for example. So I've talked about this a few times, but one of the main things that just really, really changed my trajectory was understanding that I was deflecting and avoiding feelings. And I had been doing it for years and years and years. So I would say that I've recently had an expansion. Actually, Angelic Sunflame just said that. She says, I have kind of a personal question you can answer or not, but I do see a change of an expansion of consciousness and language. Is Tassel struggling with trying to I guess it would be keeping up, or I wouldn't say that she's struggling to keep up. I think she's doing amazing. I don't think there is any keeping up like that. I think that type of framing of it is challenging for people because it implies that I'm here and she's here, which is not the case. Basically, yes, I've hit a place. I've been talking with Tassel a lot. Tassel has basically actually been my sort of grounding teacher in many, many ways to keep me sort of okay with what I'm going through. Because I feel, it feels like, you know, I've said to Tassel, I said on the stream, I don't even like hearing my name that much. So if people call me Sean, I'm kind of like, well, you can call me that if you want to. Or Tassel says I'm from Canada, and I'm like, well, I'm not. And things like that. So it does become really challenging. So Tassel and I are both together navigating this new way that I'm showing up, and I'm trying to be as gentle with myself and with her as possible as basically my entire reality falls away. And that's, you know, not unfortunately, it's fortunate. It's all a beautiful thing, But I was expressing to Tassel, there can be a lot of fear that comes up. 50% of the people that attain the Christed state that I'm feeling decide to leave, end the incarnation, and it's a choice to stay and act as sage that gets offered, and so that hasn't been offered to me yet. So I'm not quite at that, but it's coming, and it's not a suicide. What it is you've probably heard of the monks that they go into a cave and they just meditate until the body decays, more or less. That's one way that might happen. So I was expressing to Tassel that I've been having a sort of constant um, existential crisis as the ego surrenders everything. Um, and so it's just been a constant sort of, this too I surrender. This too I surrender to you, my Father. But in order for me to be the son here, all of that has to fall away. And I can know it as story. I can recall it as story. And so it's challenging because in partnership, we have sort of me and Tassel have this sort of like story we've made together of our partnership and our relationship and our business. And it's really challenging to then perceive that from the state of consciousness that I'm perceiving from now, and see it in a way that Tassel doesn't feel threatened by. And so I think we're just moving through all of this together, really, and there is no her keeping up. I really that feels really bad to hear that type of expression, and I'm not suggesting you meant anything by it like that, but there's no keeping up. I don't see it like that at all. Actually, I see it as her guiding me as teacher. So it's entirely the opposite in many ways. I see her guiding me back to myself and to help me feel safe in this sort of new space. And my body's starting to feel better now. The Buddha talks about the skin burning, or no, the bones breaking. Christ bled sweat. This is how it feels when the Christ is awakening. The body is changing, the physiology changes, sight might change. So I'm just, we're just working through this together, I think. And yeah, there's absolutely no up or catching up or any of that. That would be entirely contrary to my presence being here.
I think what's really interesting, we've talked a lot about this with divine union, that different strengths and say challenges for each other, we kind of come together as a whole. So I kind of like to think of us in a way just as one unit. And if I were experiencing everything you were experiencing, probably as a unit, that would be difficult for us. So I think we complement each other. And I think it's my incarnative role to be the more grounded, bit more in the material world on my end. And it's your role to be in the consciousness that you're in. So it's interesting because, it's easy to make judgments about it. And I think we at least I know I do myself too, judgments about like what's happening between us. And but I do think the truth for all these divine unions is you'll probably complement each other, and you can think of each other as a unit. So it's not my role to be in your consciousness, at least at this point in time. It's not my role. And you said that I'm teaching you or grounding you, and you're doing the same for me. Like you're I'm growing from what you're going through. I think you're growing from what I'm going through. I think my path, a lot of what I'm doing right now is just an expansion of unconditional love. I believe I am here on the planet to be absolute unconditional love. And that's the consciousness that I'm expanding in.
Yeah, and actually, it was you that sort of really exemplified that for me. When other people would say, or even when I would talk about unconditional love in the past, I didn't understand it. I didn't experience it, and not with another person, or even sort of the idea that it was really possible with other people. I kind of didn't really believe in it back then, or I had convinced myself I didn't believe in it, but in my heart, I truly always knew. And just like Tassel said, the arrangements of these couplings always serve the highest and best. So basically, not everyone is meant to raise so much, and not everyone, you know, when we hear raise consciousness or something, our egoic mind goes, oh, that's better, that's a better thing, or, you know, it kind of puts a bit of an opinion on it, that, you know, because we think of something like, I don't know, IQ or some other metric of measurement, and when we say something like, I want to increase my intelligence, and we think of it like that, and it is to a degree like that, but the idea that it's a problem where we are is a misperception. So yeah, it is challenging, and it's hard for both of us for different reasons. I think it's just because I'm trying to help her see me, see what I'm moving through inside a bit, give her a bit of a glimpse into what is happening with me, and help her feel a little bit more comfortable, you know. And so I basically have been making effort to say, look, I can be Sean, right? I can put on my Sean costume. It's lots of fun. That's what I'm doing right now, more or less. For me to speak, I have to do that. So I, you know, in order to be like, look, I'm here. I'm here. I'm not, nothing's happened. I'm not going anywhere. I have no plans to go anywhere. And yet it's not so much Sean that's here anymore. So it's an odd place. Lots of fun. Lots of fun. It's beautiful, confusing. And I still have plenty to discover with this. It's very new to me. So I could just fall out of it as well. That's possible. We start to be able to sort of discern for us where we should settle. And that's another really important point that Tassel kind of brought up. Like, you know, if in this life where we have particular lessons that are needed to be traversed, we're not really going to want to ascend up to that space, because those lessons become irrelevant, basically. So if we still have lessons, then it's very appropriate for us to maintain, you know. And also, like, Tassel is so very much unconditional with her love. The consciousness there is very, very, very high and rare already. So a lot of that comparison of him versus me or her versus me is really just harmful. Generally, it's really harmful, I think, for us to frame things that way. It can be anyways, and it is important to notice differences, notice, but when we say, when we start to compare in some sort of way, like, oh, I'm not doing well enough. And actually, it's interesting, I should say this too. It goes the other way. There's a part of Sean that is envious of Tassel for this. There's a part of Sean that doesn't want this to happen at all, right? That is envious that Tassel seems to still be able to know herself in the identity a bit more, and there's a, there's a sense from Sean that that would be preferable, because this other path has been, I don't want to say challenging. Basically, it's challenging until it's not. And that's one of the ways we see as well, time isn't real, because it's all challenge until we look at it and realize it wasn't challenge, it was just opportunity and growth and awesome. And so even the challenge or the concept of challenge doesn't make any sense anymore. But yeah, so I hope that helps, and I hope Tassel doesn't mind. I know this topic is challenge. It's very new for both of us. I could feel a bit of stuff moving around us as we were talking about it. A little bit of distortion present. So all is well. I'm here. I know who I am, and I know how I serve.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just end with something that came through you that I think is a beautiful affirmation for anybody on any path in this incarnation, and that is, I have faith that we will move to the highest good for us. I have faith that we are in the middle of the highest good for us, and that what has transpired is also of the highest good. So just complete faith, complete surrender, all is well.
Yeah, and some partnerships too. Like one of them's gonna sort of pop up before the other. Usually they don't simultaneously. They kind of, what ends up happening is sometimes they'll go back and forth, and what ends up happening is the one that happens to have stepped a step higher just sort of reaches back and says, here's what I've seen and learned here. Does that resonate? Like, and so what we'll find sometimes is the partner's like, oh, well, good for you, but I really still feel called to explore this. And that's basically just accepting. These are essentially our karma. It is our karma to go do what we feel really, really desirous of doing. We can know that we're sort of participating in our narrative. There's nothing wrong with it. But then other times, they'll sort of just pop up with, and then eventually you're both doing the same thing. There's also something to be said, and if someone could correct me, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm not familiar with any female avatars yet that have come. And I think that perhaps now's the time for that. And I think that's perhaps what's starting to occur in some of the women. I don't know exactly why that's been, but if you look at like the Christ or the Buddha and the Bhagavad Gita with Krishna, there's women. So for example, Mother Teresa, very, very, very gifted spiritual teacher, but wasn't to the avatar level quite. She was very saintly. She was saintly, but not quite at avatar. So I think what we're doing here is actually transforming that entire thing, and we will see much more women, I think, pop up, so to speak, in that way. And I'm really curious to see how all this plays out at this point. Very, very, very curious. and just humbled and grateful to be of service in any way.
Beautiful. So that seems like a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, it really helps our work to give the video a like or a comment. Please subscribe to our channel. And we also have a really exciting free gathering a week from tomorrow. It's March 10th, 8 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be on the topic of divine unions, twin flames. And we really see, basically, we want to provide support to others on this journey, in part because it has been challenging for, I don't want to speak for you, but at least for me, it's been challenging.
It was challenging. Like I said, it was challenging the whole time until it's not.
Yeah.
But I think because we're in that, we can help.
Yes. So there's a link in the episode description to register for the free gathering. We already have so many people registered. We're really excited to meet everybody. So if you feel called, please join us. And we also have an amazing Patreon community. And tomorrow we're going to be doing our monthly course, and it's going to be on this same topic. So if you join before tomorrow, you can come for a free course if this topic really calls to you.
Yes. Very grateful for everyone. And really appreciate you taking the time to hear us out and your attention.
Yes. So much love to everybody.
Take care.
Bye.